Such a relief to get out after 25 days of relentless bombardments and siege. More than 300 people with foreign passports were allowed to leave Gaza by the Rafah crossing today, including 2 Britons. Their departure approved by Egypt and Israel. Others are expected to leave in the coming days.
عشت كل الحروب. كنا بنفكر دائما إنه أقل مشكلة صارت لنا من أول ما بدأت الحرب هي قطعة الكهرباء والمي. بس بعد هيك صارت المشاكل جدا كبيرة، يعني إحنا قطعنا مشوار ربنا يعلم كيف تركنا غزة وإجينا وبالأخير صفينا في مدارس الإيواء.
Ambulances brought more than 80 people with serious injuries for treatment over the border in Egypt. Gazan hospitals are completely overwhelmed and many thousands will need attention. A few aid trucks entered, but again, the supply comes nowhere near the need. Israel targeted Jabalia, the biggest camp in Gaza, again today after yesterday's multiple strikes. The Israelis appear to believe that Hamas fighters are still operating in tunnels beneath the rubble. Speaking from an unknown location, the Hamas political leader said the hostages, some also in tunnels, were in danger from the bombing.
أن تدرك هذه العصبة المتغطرسة بل هذه العصابة المتغطرسة أنهم غرقوا في رمال غزة سيكون ذلك قد كلفهم كثيرا وعلى كل الأصعدة بما فيه حياة أسراهم.
The Israel Defense Force appears to be treating the north of the Gaza Strip as a free fire zone. It's hard to imagine what Gaza will look like when this is over, let alone the lives of those civilians who survive. And that's the purpose of releasing this footage, to show the might and determination of the Israeli military.
אנחנו במלחמה קשה. זאת תהיה גם מלחמה ארוכה. יש לנו בה הישגים חשובים, אבל גם אבדות כואבות. אנחנו יודעים, כל חייל שלנו הוא עולם ומלואו. ואני אומר למשפחות היקרות, עם ישראל כולו איתכם בשעת יגונכם הכבד, הקשה מנשוא.
Today saw the funeral of 20-year-old Israeli reservist Lavi Lipschitz, killed attacking Jabalia yesterday. A majority of Israelis want to destroy Hamas in retaliation for the atrocities committed on October the 7th. The price, they say, is worth it.
Well, let's talk to Lindsay live now. Lindsay, when I first got here 3 weeks ago, we were all very focused on the threat, the potential threat from Lebanon, from Hezbollah in the north. But it turns out actually that the more real threat, to some extent, today at least, came from the south, from the pro-Iranian Houthis in Yemen. Tell us about that.
That's right. In the last few days, the Houthis have fired missiles, we think cruise missiles, and also drones towards Israel. Now, Israel today moved more naval assets into the Red Sea so that they could shoot those down. And there are American naval assets in the region as well, and they have shot some of those down before. The Houthis, as you say, are backed by Iran. I mean, really, these days, I think you can say they're Iranian proxies, as is Hezbollah in Lebanon, as are militia in both Syria and Iraq. And they've been doing a bit. You know, the Hezbollah have been firing over the border into Israel. The militia in Iraq have been attacking American assets there. Now, the question is, does Iran want to enter this war in a more strategic way? And the answer is probably not. They probably just want to keep this going, to keep up the pressure. But of course, there is a great danger of instability across the region. And I think one of the things the Americans may be worried about is that the Israelis may decide that they want to, I don't know how you'd put it, take a pop at Iran. And that, of course, could be very dangerous across the region.
So you've got the potential military threats from the north and the south. Then you've got the Jordanian government withdrawing its ambassador to Israel and telling the Israeli ambassador to Amman to stay at home here in Israel. I mean, they seem to be kind of courting more and more isolation. Why do you think that is?
Well, I think that the Israelis know that the longer this war goes on and the more Palestinian civilians that they kill in that war, the more unpopular they're going to be around the region, and also the more difficult it will be for the Americans and Europeans to continue to support them. What has happened in the past is that eventually there comes a point where the Americans say, you really can't keep going on this. Now, I think that that point may be further away this time than it has been before, but the mood here, they're so angry. They're so angry about what happened. I think that they will put up with it, and I think that they also believe that they still will have the support of the Gulf countries. Okay. And that's where the power lies in the region these days.
Lindsay in Tel Aviv, thank you very much indeed. Well, since Israel announced the beginning of the second stage of its war in Gaza, information about its military operations has been tightly controlled, although the IDF announced tonight that it had lost 15 troops since Friday when the ground war began. But over the last few days, geolocated footage and high-resolution satellite imagery have allowed us a glimpse of the IDF's movements inside Gaza. Here's Kieran Woodley.
אנחנו יוצאים למתקפה על החמאס וארגוני הטרור ברצועת עזה. מטרתנו היא אחת.
Israel's PR war machine is in overdrive. The ground invasion will be televised by the IDF. Perhaps tempered by the US warning them against a full-blown charge into Gaza. This second stage so far appears to be an incremental advance into the northern half of the Strip. But what we know is limited, because Israel has been careful with the information it releases.
Israel is operating in a space of strategic ambiguity, which is exactly what they want to do to kind of keep Hamas on their back foot. Not knowing what to expect is something that makes Hamas very unsure of how they can enter the battle, but also how they can enter into political dialogue.
Following the Hamas attack of October 7th, Israel's war cabinet vowed to destroy Hamas. On October 13th, they told civilians in Gaza to evacuate from the top of the Erez crossing down to Wadi Gaza. Israeli tanks began to amass just north of the Gaza Strip in fields here, with others seen down near to Kibbutz Be'eri, the scene of one of Hamas's massacres. The IDF said short ground incursions began on October 22nd, but we didn't get images until days later. It was last Friday night that Israel imposed a communications blackout. Internet, mobile and landlines all cut. An indication of more permanent incursions into Gaza. The IDF has continued to release footage from inside, showing its soldiers conducting operations. Columns of tanks driving along the sand, bulldozers clearing the way. But the Israelis do not say exactly where and when these images are from. They just release them day by day. But judging by where the tanks were before the incursions, and from satellite images, we know Israeli tanks entered Gaza from these three locations. And videos from social media show us where they were this week. One shows forces raising a flag at a hotel here, 3 kilometers from the border. The video appeared as early as Saturday, but we've not been able to verify when it was filmed. Another shows a tank firing on a civilian car on Salah al-Din Road. The video appeared on Monday morning and was filmed by a Palestinian journalist. A satellite image taken on Monday at 9:34 a.m. shows smoke rising from the same location. And this image from Planet Labs, also from Monday morning, shows the tracks of Israeli tanks and armoured vehicles, locations where they appear to be bedding in, as well as reaching more built-up areas, all littered with craters. So what does this tell us about the Israeli strategy?
I think what we see now seems to be some sort of pincher movement, an encirclement. And I think if these two thrusts meet somewhere along the coast, you have a full encirclement of Gaza City. That will then provide the IDF with an forward operating base from which they can launch attacks into Gaza City. And that's kind of what the IDF is preparing, what Israel is preparing the world for, is a long game of month and month, potentially they said even years, of kind of smoking Hamas out and laying siege on Gaza City, but with it also laying siege to those remaining civilians who are still there.
That siege was seen in Israel's devastating strikes on the Jabalia refugee camp, which caused dozens of deaths and injuries, according to Gaza's health ministry. The IDF said yesterday's attack killed several Hamas militants, including a senior military leader, hiding among the refugees and in tunnels underneath the camp. Hamas denies their leader was ever there. This shows the devastating consequences of this war for Palestinian civilians, as the Israelis push ahead and try to target Hamas infrastructure, in particular the network of tunnels. The Israeli mission is complicated not just because hostages are assumed to be underground, but that they have to know where the tunnels are. Footage from early this week showed Hamas emerging from one near the Erez crossing, seemingly unknown to the Israelis.
Urban warfare is extremely complex because it's three-dimensional. In the way it's in the air, it's on the surface, it's in towers, but it's also subterranean. Hamas has also been able for 17 years to kind of dig in, fortifying an urban environment in a way that no other actor has done over the last couple of decades. I can't think of any other urban combat environment where the defending party, which is Hamas in this respect, was able to dig deep tunnels, 70 meters deep, hundreds of kilometers of tunnels, were able to, create command and control centers that are completely undiscoverable and impenetrable from the air.
And none of this is helped on the Israeli side by reports that the political wing is divided under the unpopular Benjamin Netanyahu, with no idea what comes after Hamas, even if Hamas can be defeated. The only thing for certain is that there will be more deaths in Gaza, with civilians bearing the brunt, both during this war and after, in the rubble left behind.
Kieran Woodley reporting. Well, let's speak now to Ayelet Shaked in Tel Aviv. She was Israel's interior minister until last year, and before that served as Minister for Justice. Ayelet Shaked, thank you very much for coming on the programme. I just wonder what your reaction is to something which I heard from one of your most decorated soldiers, Ralik Shafir, the other day. He was the man who launched the attack on the nuclear reactor in Osirak in 1981, and he told me that going into Gaza with ground troops, even if you kill Hamas commanders, is a very bad idea because the amount of damage, especially to the civilian population, will be so enormous, it'll just create a new generation of Hamas leaders. What do you think?
We didn't choose it. Hamas launched a barbaric, genocidal attack on Israel. They committed atrocities that humanity has never seen in the 21st century, and we just didn't have a choice. After they slaughtered our babies, they murdered our women, they murdered whole families, they did horrible atrocities, and tortured children. We just didn't have any choice. And we said to the population in Gaza, go to the south of Gaza River. But the Hamas used their own population as a human shield.
But this soldier, this Israeli soldier, was telling me that actually you do have a choice. There is a clever way of doing this that does not create an even greater threat for Israel down the road, saves thousands of civilian lives in the process, and doesn't isolate you in the region. And the government at the moment seems to be saying, we don't care.
I don't think that the government don't care. You see that we didn't choose this war. For many years, we just hope that we can live next to each other. But after the massacre on Black Saturday, we realized that it's either us or them. We will not stop until we will eliminate the Hamas. From the leadership till the last soldiers, they are all dead men walking, and there is no other choice to do it if you're not using ground assault.
Right. You say it's either us or them. The question is, what do you mean by them? Let me just read you what you wrote on your Facebook page in 2014, if I may. You wrote, behind every terrorist stand dozens of men and women.
It's not me. Just a second. I want to correct you. I didn't wrote it. I just quote an article of one of the journalists in Israel. So I didn't wrote it.
Right, because can I just finish the quote there? It says essentially that, Palestinian civilians, including the mothers of terrorists, need to be killed in order to make the threat go away. So you're telling me you don't believe that?
Okay. No, I didn't wrote it, but I want to tell you something, that one of the terrorists called his parents after he murdered an Israeli young woman. And he called his mother and father and said, Mom, Dad, I just murdered an Israeli woman and I murdered 10. And you know what his parents told him?
Right.
Go ahead, son. Well done. Murder more.
Does that mean that the father or the mother who replied in that way is a fair target for the IDF?
No, it's not. But all the Hamas soldiers, from the leadership till the last soldiers, are all targets because they actually did the most horrible massacre since the Holocaust. And and you need to understand, it's either us or them. And regarding the population, the civilian that didn't interfere, by the way, hundreds of civilians did join the massacre. They just crossed the border, they raped women, they murdered, and they kidnapped our children. They were civilian, not just the Hamas soldiers. You need to understand that as well.
And we have documented that a lot, and we feel your pain. It was a terrible tragedy that happened to your country. But what I'm wondering is both the morality of what is happening to Palestinian civilians, not all of whom support Hamas by any means, and also whether it's sensible, because at the end of the day, you're still going to have to live next to these people, and they're going to live next to you. So what's the arrangement going to be? What's the big plan?
But they can choose. If they don't want to be a human shield to the Hamas, they can move to the south and be safe. And if you ask me what is the end game, Hamas will not be there anymore. So, you know, I think that the international community should do a alliance of maybe Arab countries and just, do something international there, because the Hamas will not be there until we finish.
Right. Okay. Ayelet Shaked, thank you very much indeed for joining us.